We see it all the time in TV and movies. Quote, based on a true story. They love throwing that bad boy around and slapping it onto pretty much anything. It makes sense too. I mean, the point of producing content is to make something that resonates with audiences. What better way to resonate with people than make something that they think is real? That creates a certain dynamic of attachment and familiarity, almost making it relatable even if it isn't. Plausibility is always a super valuable asset. But have you ever seen some of the things that they've attached the based on a true story stamp on? Some shows and films are just so wild and absurd and unbelievable that there's no way it actually is true. In season 2 of Fargo, which is apparently based on a true story, there's extraterrestrials. And that's supposed to be true. Not that I'm a denier of alien life or anything like that, but it just feels like a tough one to confirm the accuracy of. So how true is a true story? How far can the truth stretch, and what are the actual guidelines governing what does and doesn't qualify, if there even are any? You know, I recently read the Norm Macdonald biography, and this theory stretches over literature too, so that's why I'm bringing this up. Norm is my favorite stand-up comedian of all time, so I was stoked to read his book and learn more about him. Only, it was mostly nonsense. The book is called Based on a True Story, a Memoir, because it features real people, places, and events, only a completely made-up plot. He doesn't have the best recollection of his past, so he kinda just makes assumptions and fills in all the details as interestingly as possible. I loved it, but it certainly wasn't factual by any means. Which begs the question, is it still based on a true story? I mean, it was a real person talking about real things, so I guess so, right? It's fiction masquerading around in a memoir costume. This happens in Hollywood all the time. Marketing a film as being based on a true story makes the story that much more dramatic. Like, the movie Possession is based on a true story. Sure, movie studios like to be a little bit lenient of the definition of the truth, but a hand crawls out of a young girl's mouth and stabs her father with a fork. That's part of a movie, which is apparently, according to the poster, supposed to be real. I don't know, I'm just not sold on that one, you know? The film is a, quote, retelling of the classic John Haxton book, The Dybbuk Box. It's the story of a medical museum curator in Missouri who bought a wooden cabinet with a Hebrew carving on it off eBay, not knowing that it was possessed by an evil Jewish spirit. I know it's supposed to be based on a true story, but something about that premise just doesn't sit right. Either way, by calling it a retelling, that's just fancy lingo for saying that they're gonna cut out all the boring stuff and pack it with as much cheap thrills as they possibly can. As a finished result, the movie Possession is completely different from the Haxton story. The movie is about a 12-year-old girl who becomes cursed after buying the same box at a yard sale, and the whole thing goes kinda exorcist-y. So pretty much 100% of the movie is made up, minus the idea of the haunted box. And that, my friends, is based on a true story. It's because calling it true and planting the idea in a viewer's head that these events have actually happened amplifies anything. It makes a scene like that all the more scarier. We're more empathetic when watching something like The Blind Side, when we know something along those lines actually happened in the world, and it wasn't just the result of some writer's imagination. But what are the rules here? Is there anything in place stating what is and isn't allowed? Or is this just the Wild West and you can call a movie whatever you want? Well, it's actually a lot closer to the latter than the former. If it's inspired by a true story, like the haunted Jewish box in The Possession, then you have enough evidence to support your claim as being based on a true story.
So you concur?
Apologies for the rhyme, but it doesn't have to be an actual factual account. There's different laws in different countries when it comes to using names and real people who actually exist or existed, but they really aren't that strict either. Typically, the producer will sit down with a media lawyer to go over what's called errors and omissions insurance in case anyone has an issue with the finished product. But if the story is about someone who's no longer alive, or if the story is based in myths or urban legends, or has been passed through generations, then you can go ahead and call that thing a true story or inspired by true events as much as you'd like. Quick timeout to remind you guys to subscribe to ScreenRant and make sure that you turn on those notifications. If you're on mobile, just go into your YouTube settings and turn on mobile notifications. Alright, back to the video. Even the movie 300 is considered to be based on a true story. If you aren't familiar, it's the, quote, true story of Spartan King Leonidas and his 300 men who fought the Persian army. You're probably wondering how something like that is possibly fact-checkable. Well, it's not, which means they're free to call it whatever they want. Because they don't have to prove that it's true if you can't prove that it isn't. That's cool and all, but it also opens the door for a crazy amount of bias when you start retelling stories or doing biopics about people who are still currently here, especially when they have a say in what's being made, which is typically the case. For example, 2015's blockbuster hit Straight Outta Compton, about the life and times of NWA, one of the most controversial rap groups from the late 1980s and early 1990s. It was a solid movie, but it was also produced by Dr. Dre and Ice Cube, two of the four members of the group. How can we trust that this is the true story when it's being told from just half of the perspectives? And in this case, they show a bunch of ugly infighting and legal battles that the crew went through. Retelling something that heated probably has a lot of emotions attached to it. It's virtually impossible to not tell that story without a smidge of bias.
You're kidding me.
After all, calling it based on a true story is always just gonna mean based on how one or only some of the people remember it. There's biopics, which are about specific individuals, like Ray about Ray Charles, Man on the Moon about Andy Kaufman, Ali about Muhammad Ali, and the list goes on and on and on. Those are typically somewhat accurate, although I'm sure littered with a healthy heaping of bias. Then there's the true stories, which are meant to be about true events that went down in real life. Movies like Apollo 13 about a lunar mission in 1970, or Catch Me If You Can about an FBI agent chasing around a fraudster, or The Big Sick about Kumail Nanjiani and Emily V. Gordon's experience as an interracial couple. When it comes to the, quote, true stories, how much of it is actually true? Well, according to a wonderful study by the website Information is Beautiful, where they broke down how accurate some of Hollywood's biggest true stories are, not that true. They went through each scene of each movie and then fact-checked how accurate they were compared to the actual events. And the results were pretty fascinating. 2013's Wolf of Wall Street actually did pretty well compared to the others, coming in at 63.1% accurate. 2010's The Social Network was also pretty good, getting a passing grade with 61.3% accurate. Then there's quite a few failures. For example, 2018's Bohemian Rhapsody, about Freddie Mercury and the band Queen, was only 50% accurate. In fact, Sacha Baron Cohen was originally supposed to play the lead role of Freddie Mercury, but he quit the project over what was called creative differences. In reality, he had an issue with the other surviving members of the band wanting the entire second half of the movie to be about how they carried on without their frontman. Again, the truth always varies depending on who's telling it. The Oscar-nominated Dallas Buyers Club was only 41% accurate, and the gritty war story American Sniper was a terrible 29.4% accurate when compared to the actual truth. The worst offender of them all is the Benedict Cumberbatch-led story of a computer scientist during World War II, The Imitation Game, which clocked in at 17.6% accurate. 17.6%. I feel like Space Jam would have done better than 17.6%. Even if we're being flexible and ignoring all the parts that are true-ish, or like vaguely true enough to be considered flexibly true, The Imitation Game still only got a 42.3%.
It is so stupid. It's terrible. I do not even like it.
Even if we turn a blind eye to most of the mistakes and give them the benefit of the doubt in every scenario, it's still a fail, by a long shot.
So sorry.
In my opinion, the worst offender of this whole based on a true story myth is Fargo.
Oh. Jeez.
Both the movie and the subsequent show. I mentioned the aliens there at the beginning, but that's not even all of it. The 1996 movie ends with a treasure being buried in the snow off of a highway in Minneapolis. Do you have any idea how many people have ventured out to that very spot on that very highway, hoping that they'd find that treasure? That's how literal this movie was taken, simply because they slapped a based on a true story there at the beginning. The opening credits even say, "This is a true story. The events depicted in this film took place in Minnesota in 1987. At the request of the survivors, the names have been changed. Out of respect for the dead, the rest has been told exactly as it occurred." Want to know what the true part of Fargo was? There's there's one particularly grisly scene in the movie where someone uses a wood chipper. In reality, there was a murder trial in 1986 where something similar happened to dispose of a body using a wood chipper. That's it. Someone put someone in a wood chipper in real life, and someone does the same thing in the movie Fargo, so therefore they get to say that Fargo is based on a true story.
It's a real shame.
So, is a true story really a true story? Well, kind of, but also not at all.
Thank you very much.
What do you guys think? What's your favorite movie that's supposed to be based on a true story? Let's see if anyone has any info that would debunk those truthful claims. Before you go, make sure you hit that thumbs up button, and if you haven't already, make sure that you're subscribed to ScreenRant to stay up to date on all of our latest releases. Until next time, bye!